of the sexual function and expression properly done within the confines of the covenant relationship of marriage. And that this Puritanism that has been adapted in the church is not from God. God's first commandment was to be fruitful and multiply. His second commandment was, don't eat that tree. But the first commandment was to be fruitful and multiply. That the proper place for sex and sexual expression is within the marriage relationship. And when it is to be experienced in all of its fullness and glory. Amen? So let's stop giving the devil all of that and understand and talk about what God's intent for your body is. And how it is dignified and glorified in all of its expression when done in the proper confines of a marriage relationship. So I'm saying all that because when you hear some of these expressions, remember we're in the part of the song where the two are in their marriage. That's important. So, chapter 7. This is really the last that we will hear from the beloved. The lover. Chapter 8 is the beloved more or less having the last word. Okay? So the lover speaks, "How graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master hand. Your navel a rounded bowl that never lacks mixed wine. Your belly a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is an ivory tower. Your eyes are pools in Hesbon, by the gate of Bath Rabbim. Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon, overlooking Damascus. Your head crowns you like Carmel, and your flowing locks are like purple. A king is held captive in the tresses." Let's stop right here. What he's doing, if you notice, is giving a description of his beloved from the feet going up all the way to her head. He describes all of her. He's not just enamored with her face or eyes. It's her whole being. Her feet are beautifully put in sandals. Her thighs are like jewels. Her navel, her breasts, her neck, her eyes, all of this, all that's about her is beautiful. All of her is beautiful. And if we think about this by analogy, this is how God views us. He likes all of us from the soles of our feet to the tops of our head. It's not like he likes only this part, only that part. I'm a leg man. No. God's an all-person, all-body man. All right? He likes it all. He created it all, and he created it beautiful. And this is Solomon going over with her. Now, your belly is a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. That's a very interesting expression. Why would he say a heap of wheat? Well, wheat is a sign of fertility. So what he's saying is that she's a very fertile woman, that she has a fecundity about her. Okay? That she's not only enticing, but she's also fertile. That's important. Why? Well, because you remember in the Old Testament, and really in up until around 200 or so years ago, the idea of a woman's fertility was very important because it not only preserved the family line, but it showed a sign of blessing of God. Women who were fertile were considered blessed. those who were barren were considered being under a curse of some kind. And it was considered, what's wrong with me? And so you look in the Old Testament, and these women who are barren, like Rachel, like Hannah, like Elizabeth, were just distraught over the fact that they could not bear children. And they pleaded to the Lord about this. And often the Lord would grant them children as a sign of his blessing to them. Now, does that mean they were all sinners? No. Remember what Jesus said about the man born blind. Who sinned that this man be born blind, our Lord? And he said, no one sinned. No one sinned. In other words, don't look at all of this as being a blessing or a curse from God. Under the Old Testament, it was a sign, but it was not necessarily the only reason why. So Jesus made that clear, that it's not the reason why a person is barren or not. Okay? So just want to make that clear. But in this case, he's remarking about her potential fertility. Okay? Her breasts are like two fawns. This is like the third time he's mentioned this. It's a very gentle image about her body. Her neck, her nose, her head. And I like this. Your head crowns you like caramel. Not the candy. He's talking about Mount Carmel in Israel. Okay? And why Carmel? Because that was one of the highest peaks in Israel. Most of Israel is flat. They don't really have mountains. They have more like hills. And Carmel is one of the highest of the peaks. So it would be considered like the highest mountain in Israel. So her head is like the pinnacle, the peak of the whole body. Like Carmel is the top of Israel. It's the highest peak in Israel. And your locks are like purple. A king is held captive in the tresses. Purple was a very rare and royal color. It was a very expensive dye. Only the wealthy were able, and really only kings were able to procure this kind of dye. So he's talking about her in this very regal, very royal fashion. And he said that earlier. How graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden. Queenly maiden. Now again, you have to understand, in the Old Testament, the wife of the king was not the queen of Israel. The wife of the king was not the queen of Israel. Why? Because Solomon had 300 wives and 700 concubines. They can't all be queen of Israel. Who was? His mother. The queen mother was the queen of Israel. So for Solomon, that was Bathsheba. Why? Because a king could have many wives, but he only had one mother. And so, and it wasn't just Solomon that had a lot of wives. I mean, David had many wives as well. Not as many as Solomon, but he had many wives as well. None of them were queen of Israel. None of them. His mother was. And so there is this tradition in the monarchy of Israel, and we'll learn about this as we go over the Bible, that the queen of the realm was the regent's mother. And so there's the tradition of the queenly mother. Now when we think of Jesus, who's Jesus' mother? Mary. And what do we call her? Queen. And according to Davidic tradition, if he's the king of Israel, his mother is the queen mother of Israel. So Mary is a queen. Yes, you had a question? No? Okay. You understand that all of these wives of Solomon were never queen of Israel. Only Bathsheba was. Okay? She was the queen of Israel. Solomon was the king and his mother was the queen. All the others were simply political alliances. They were regents, queens, or princesses from their own country, and they also had some political influence in Israel itself, but they were never queen of Israel in the sense that we think of it, like the Queen of England, you know, that kind of thing. No. The queen was the queen mother. Okay. Let's see how far we can get in chapter 7. We're almost halfway through. Verse 6. Chapter 7, verse 6. How fair and pleasant you are, O loved one, delectable maiden. You are stately as a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. I say, I will climb the palm tree and lay hold of its branches. Oh, may your breasts be like the clusters of the vine, and the scent of your breath like apples, and your kisses like the best wine that goes down smoothly, gliding over lips and teeth. Again, a very erotic expression here, wouldn't you say? Even without a lot of explanation, you can get what Solomon is getting at here, right? He's talking about a marital sexual relationship here. About them in a conjugal union. Okay? Now, the scent of your breath like apples. We mentioned this earlier when the beloved talking about her lover like an apple tree. Remember that in chapter 2 or 3, I believe? And I said the apple has a dual meaning. It is an erotic symbol. It's been an erotic symbol of fruit. It's sweet, but more than that, it had a hygienic kind of application, a cologne effect, because they didn't have toothbrushes back then. The way that you deal with not brushing your teeth, if you will, is eating apples. And even nowadays, if you were to wake up in the morning, instead of brushing your teeth, you ate an apple, you would not know any different. It actually has enzymes that help counteract the plaque and so forth that builds up on your teeth. It is really a natural toothbrush. And the ancients knew this. It not only cleaned the teeth in its own way, but it also freshened the breath. So you don't wake up with morning breath and say, hi, honey, you know. You would reach and grab an apple and you would eat it, then you would communicate or kiss or whatever when you got up. That's how it was. And it wasn't just in Solomon's days. We're talking about into the Middle Ages and up until the time that oral hygiene started becoming a real thing and people invented the toothbrush and so forth. I mean, it sounds nuts to us, but this is how people lived back in the day. And the good news is that apples were an inexpensive commodity. They weren't like some of the other more exotic fruits or vegetables around. Apples were relatively common for you to get a hold of. So everyone from commoner to king could take advantage of it. Does that make sense? So when you read this, oh, may your breasts be like the clusters of the vine and the scent of your breath like apples, he's saying that she keeps good hygiene. She's pleasant to be around. Much like the beloved talks about her lover and how he is like an apple tree and that he is like covered in myrrh and frankincense. And that's, I said, well, that'd be the equivalent of putting on some cologne, some aftershave, make him smell good. So he doesn't smell like the horses that he's been riding all day, you know what I mean? And this is, and it's amazing when you look at this from the perspective of the time period, but this is how in ancient times people used to groom and keep themselves attractive back in the time before soap, water, and colognes that we understand today. Okay? Give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Verse 10. So that's really the last that we hear of the lover. Now we hear from the beloved. And what does verse 10 say? I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. And what is this? The theme of the entire book. We heard this from chapter 2, chapter 5, and now here it is in the end of the book. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. Come, my beloved, let us go forth into the fields and lodge in the villages. Let us go out early to the vineyards and see whether the vines have budded, whether the grape blossoms have opened, and the pomegranates are in bloom. Grapes, pomegranates, these are all very suggestive, tempting sweets, if you will, sweet fruits, exotic fruits. Pomegranates would have been one of those things that the ordinary folk would not have had that much attention to. They might have to grapes. Grapes would have been more common because wine was very popular and used in everyday language or everyday usage. But pomegranates, that would have been a rarity. That was not something that ordinary people would have had as easy access to. So this is a combination of both common and uncommon, exotic fruits, sweets. He's sweet to me. There I will give you my love. So he is saying, let's make love, honey. And she says, I will meet you in these exotic, sweet, blooming fields to give you my love. There's a mutual giving of each other to each other here. The mandrakes give forth fragrance, and over our doors are the choice fruits, new as well as old, which I've laid up for you, my beloved. We're going to end here. I know it's a little warm in here. Woo. Need a cold shower after this chapter, huh? And it's again,